looking at different asset classes, multifamily being one, and all these other asset classes. I'm like, who is making the most money? And so that kind of led me down this development path. I'm like, I have no idea what that looks like, but that's what kept coming up. Is like these developers that are building massive projects and getting out, they're taking big chunks of money all at once. And so
welcome to the Real Estate Reserve Podcast. I'm Jason Boone from Hard Money Bankers with my co-host Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. If this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, thank you so much for all the support. We bring on guests that are doing real estate deals in today's market. So it's a lot of fun to interview them, see what they're doing. There's a lot of different real estate investment strategies out there. And, as we've interviewed over 200 people on this podcast over the years, we've are constantly learning and growing from hearing what others will say. So I'm sure if you're listening or viewing, you will do the same. And if you're a return viewer, follower, listener, thanks again for all the support. Couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, no, it's actually it's an interesting point that you bring up that we've interviewed over 200 people, if not more, and every time we learn something new, and I think that's what's fun about this, and that's why guys, like we don't care about the subscribes or the likes or any of that type of stuff. That's why we like to share the content, because we're always learning. It's about learning. It's about sharing your knowledge. If you guys get any value out of this, the best way we can show our guests appreciation is by sharing the show. Like again, today, I went digging and I've been trying to track down our guest for a while. And he kept saying, I don't do podcasts. I'm like, I know, dude, but you got a story to share. Let's talk about it. He kept saying, I don't do podcasts. And finally I was like, all right, I broke. I'm going to do a podcast. So, we're lucky enough to get him on here, and you're not going to hear him on a bunch of other podcasts because he's not a guru. He's real people doing real things. And that's who we like to hear from. So guys, if you enjoy it, please share it. Enough about us, because this show is definitely not about us. It's about the guests that are coming in. And let's bring in Mitch all the way from Michigan. What's up, brother?
Hey, man. Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we're just lucky enough to actually have you come on, because I think it is a true statement. You've only done maybe a handful of podcasts as a whole, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where, for me anyway, I really want to cement myself with like true results. And I've done, I've got a good solid track record, thank goodness, but I also want to be the guy that's really doing things and, let my actions kind of speak for themselves. So it's been like pushing off the podcast and that type of thing to say, hey, hopefully I walk into a room in the near future without podcasts and people are like, oh, dang, like we see what he's doing. So that's kind of how I've approached that. But, there's so much power with the connections of the internet and stuff that you guys are doing. I love it. I mean, I watch you guys, and if I could take a nugget here or there from anyone, I mean, that's so powerful. So I've kind of come to the realization like, hey, just share the story, share where I came from. If that helps anyone, awesome. It's not like I'm not turning off this podcast and I've got people that I got to deal with and on real true developments and stuff that we're working on. So, that's the focus. But yeah, no, I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, razor focus. That makes sense. Ian, is my mic better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I had the wrong settings on there. So Mitch, when did you get into kind of self-storage? Like when did you Ian knows a little bit more about your backstory than I do, or the audience does. So when did you kind of find self-storage, and how did you find it? And like, kind of what was your first interaction with that asset class?
Yeah. So it came from, I started in single family, just like a lot of folks. I mean, it started with buying rentals. So I actually started with the whole, bigger pockets, self-improvement journey, reading books, and going down I started with rentals. I did everything to, I got my first duplex, and then I'm like, dang, I ran out of money. So then I went back to the books to figure out, well, how do people keep buying these? And that little bit of cash flow was like my drug of like, holy crap, I if I get enough of these, I can stop doing the other work that I'm doing. So that was my gateway into it. And then I built up a single family portfolio, and I would do kind of the Burr model. So everything that I bought, I was able to acquire with cash, rehab it, refinance it, and put that put that into the portfolio. And the goal was to, build a massive portfolio and hit $10,000 a month. That was the original goal. Now, along that journey, I had to flip because I was running out of cash. So I'm flipping. I'm burying these single family rentals, 2 units, basically 1 to 4 units. And then I started dabbling with a little bit of Airbnb and just anything to produce more cash flow. And that led me to self-storage because of a management component. So I reached 30 doors and I was like, man, this is so difficult. I've got the city after me for tall grass. I've got a rental inspection. I mean, it just freaking never ended. I actually moved into the self-storage space because I had a buddy that bought one and turned it around. And in like a matter of a year, he's like, yeah, we sold that deal, made 400 grand. I was like, oh my gosh, like, geez, I'm over here flipping houses, working my tail off to produce that type of income. And I'm like, man, that looked way easier. He changed out a sign, he changed operations. And I'm like, oh my gosh, well, that's something I should be paying attention to. So self-storage really came from me bashing my head against the wall in single family.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common journey that everybody seems to take of like, dude, single family is the drug to get in. And I'll ask you this question because it's kind of just selfish from myself, and my journey was, I don't think I was mature enough to do commercial real estate day one. How do you think you would have handled if you would have stumbled on self-storage day one before you ever bought a single family piece of property? Do you think you could have handled it?
I think that I could have handled it, but there would have been some really costly mistakes. And I also think that the only reason I was able to get into self-storage was because of that track record I had. I mean, I kind of hit a really good stride in terms of timing. Like I started doing deals in 2020, and, up to 23, everything had been going up. So luckily I had those tailwinds. But when I say that, I mean, from like the banking perspective, from showing other people that I have this track record of like turning assets around and exiting and doing well. I mean, I don't know how I would get jump rate. Everyone's like, just jump into a 24 unit. Dude, the bank's asking you what your experience is. Yeah, you could partner, but I don't know if I would have been able to do it without that. So I actually am really grateful for single family.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page there, even though that's not necessarily the only way. Ian and I, I'll never forget, we interviewed a guy that his first deal was like $1 million project, and he made $1 million in it. And I think part of it is also maybe not a limited belief, but kind of like these numbers are just so big. Like if you were like, hey, I'm going to make $1 million, like your goal was $10,000 a month. And I think that was almost like 100 grand a year is almost everybody's goal. Like, let me just get to $100,000 a year because it's a number that like I can see, but like it's also a really big number, and everyone thinks that'll work everything out as soon as you hit those numbers. And it ends up happening a lot quicker, I think, than we all would have thought, and that's why we strive for more. But I agree that like I don't think I could have got into bigger asset classes or bigger numbers just because it's like, hey, I got $10,000 in my bank account or whatever the case is, right? You don't have a lot of money. You can't like see bigger, but I do commend the folks that do jump in, 2 feet in early on, just because, they're one step ahead of all of us. But I think your path is very similar to a lot of folks, including mine and Ian's.
Yeah, I really think I remember, and it just keeps increasing, right? It's almost like your tolerance. Like I remember looking at this first 4 unit I bought, and it was like 280. And I remember being like, oh my goodness, 280 grand. And that comes from, buying stuff in the hundreds. And then it went up to, hey, 800 on my next bigger deal. And like, you just kind of keep moving that needle. And I agree with you. It would have been very difficult without someone in your corner to say, hey, this $1 million, like, this is totally doable. Here's the plan, here's our exit, and this is how we're going to make $1 million. I mean, if I had someone like that, like, I think I would be more apt to. But man, when you're on this journey, it's kind of a lonely journey, and you're signing up for, real money. So
Yeah, I think that's that real money statement that you were starting to allude to is like, I think people's risk tolerance day one, they're like, today, balls to the wall is like, what we'll risk and what we're willing to do comes from comfortability of doing deals versus saying day one, you're like dipping your toe in and like, yo, this is my last 15 grand or my last 25 grand. It took me however many years to, save it up. And then it's like, oh shit, now what? And I think that's some of that barrier to entry that makes people scared of commercial real estate, even though obviously it's all getting sexier, because of owner finance and what people are teaching and blah, 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 all the fun stuff. But in the same sense, people's risk tolerance still needs to be aligned with what they're about to do. And, it's something interesting to watch what you're doing more and more development deals. When you were doing single family and we're going to get into your development journey that you're doing, but like, when you started doing single family real estate, were you building new houses or did you just start with the value add single family pay to play game?
Yeah, so kind of back to that first rental, it was all about rental income to begin with. And that was that $10,000, goal. I hit that and I was like, okay, well, now I want to make some real money. Like, I'm trying to flip some houses and pad the bank and do all of those things. So, and I bought a piece of land dirt cheap. And I was about to build my first duplex, and I ran into some setback issues and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, gosh, the guys that are doing development seem to be doing development. Like, that's what they do. And it's all about that. Like, hey, what are you? Are you a value add investor? Are you a developer? Like, what is your bread and butter? And I think the person that does really well, they have one thing that they're just great at. And so, to answer your question, no, it wasn't me. It wasn't me turning things around. It wasn't me building all this stuff. I was like, rental income. And then it was like, okay, how do we get out of this whole management thing? I tried a manager. It was brutal. So that's when I pivoted to storage. And yeah, we can kind of get into the development stuff, but it was really, I was not a developer in the beginning by any means.
Yeah. So you build like 30 houses, 40 houses. You learn how to, talk to sellers, banks, all that fun stuff. Talk about your first self-storage deal. Was it a value add deal? Did you come up out of the ground? Like, what does that look like? Size, square footage, rough purchase price, just to give people a frame of reference. And if you can kind of just give a frame of reference of what you were spending to buy a single family house where you were, just to compare so people can kind of understand.
Yeah. So my first self-storage deal actually came out of state. It was in North Carolina. Purchase price was $850,000. It was 20,000 square feet. I think I had like 120 units or something. And so I just, again, it was me kind of pressing myself to go bigger. At that point, I was like, I want to get into this space. Like, this seems like a good deal. I got in there, changed the signage. I got out the tenants that shouldn't have been in there, the typical value add deal. So bought it at a good price. And I was like, I don't think I can lose on this. And to compare that to singles, I think the last largest deal I had in my single family portfolio was, I think, that 4 unit at 270, 280. So I went from 280 to 800. And that was a big deal. I mean, I was like, holy crap, this has got to work.
Yeah.
And, I often say this to folks. I think the first deal has to go well, because I mean, if it doesn't, I feel like now you're going uphill and you're going to be like, dude, maybe this isn't for me, So to me, I think finding that first deal that has a clear path, whether you get out or you hold or whatever, I think that's super important.
Yeah, I think Jason has a similar thesis when it comes to capital investors, right, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the first deal we ever put a capital investor in, it has to perform no matter what, right? It's got to
Yep.
be the cleanest, easiest deal, because if it doesn't perform, they're not going to reinvest with you on the next deal, even if they get paid off and everything works out fine. But if it's a headache and it's a pain in the neck, like it's they don't want to be involved, and I don't blame them. And I think the same thing. Also, though, it's on the other side of this. There's so many real estate investors I know that kind of luck their way through the first deal, either because, we all know this, right? Like, and then they think that's how it's going to be forever. And then they get freaking just smacked in the tooth, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, this is easy. It's like, yo, the market's just been increasing. You could have bought a crappy deal and that could have happened, or this was lucky, or this was lucky. I mean, the first wholesale real estate deal that I did in like, I don't know, 2003 or 2004, like early on, like we made $30,000 on it. And we're like, this is great. Like it was more money than ever made in our lives. And so, but I agree with you. I mean, I think it's got to be clean, and a lot of real estate investors, are cautious, but at the same time, like there is a barrier that you do got to jump in to do a deal, right? And I think we all tell ourselves that, hey, well, even if it breaks even, we're still, learning from it, and it's a good experience, and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I mean, I think, keep it clean, keep it simple, especially at the beginning. Don't try to do anything crazy, and then work your way up, work your way up the ladder.
So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mitch.
I was just going to say, I mean, that was actually my advice when I got into single family. And I think it's great for folks to hear that, is like, my thing was always paint, flooring, and fixtures. Like I literally always said that. What are we doing on this one? Paint, flooring, fixtures. That's it. Like make it very simple. And then that threshold will go up. Now we're removing walls. We're opening the open concept move on this one. So like, things just progress as you progress, and it's kind of back to that mindset thing of like, signing on the debt and being comfortable with that. Like you just grow as an investor, and so I think that's huge.
Yeah. So as you grow and you're doing this first storage deal, and we'll get into kind of where it sits today or what you sold it for, but what challenges were you worried about buying a deal? Because I'm guessing this is the first deal you buy out of state. Looking back on it, going into it, what were you scared of that you shouldn't have been scared of? And what were you scared of that was actually scary and worth being scared about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first and foremost, it was out of my state. I've never had purchased any real estate out of Michigan. So that was number one. So now I'm hopping on a plane and like, I'm not only jumping into self-storage, but now I'm like, okay, I'm going to fly down here. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, when you sign up for that, like, dude, we're going to do anything it takes to turn this around. Like now you're kind of backed into a corner. And I typically kind of do that with a lot of things. I'm like, oh, I'll sign up for this podcast. Here I am now. I'm forced to do it. But, with that deal, I think the big thing was management. And then, I wasn't worried about so much like how to operate it. I think like, just like anything, you get in there and you start to move things around, and you're going to find out exactly what you got to do. So those things I wasn't concerned about. I was concerned about, hey, am I going to be able to get out of this deal? And that was a little concerning because I didn't know the market. And I think I knew I bought it right though. And that was the big key thing. It's like, I purchased this right. I should be able to refinance out, like no problem, get all my cash back, do the same thing I had done in single family. So I had that business plan set and we executed. I did end up selling it a couple years later, just to get away from not having to deal with it out of state. But Yeah, I don't think there was anything that I was like really nervous about other than the purchase price, and the exit a little bit.
Yeah, well, at that point, you sign the documents. There ain't no returning it,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, well, we're gonna figure this out. It's obviously it's private industry, but presumably you sell it and make a good profit. If you want to share, great. If not, I get it. And then what's your next steps? You do deal one. Do you have to sell this deal before you do deal two, or did you hop into deal two? What's that path look like going forward?
Yeah, this is another great point because so I did end up selling it like 11 months later. So I got everyone out that wasn't paying, increased revenue quite substantially, and then I think we ended up selling. I think it was like around 1.3. So we made a good chunk of change off of this, and that was the plan the whole time. Is like get in, turn it around, get out. Now I wanted to 1031, but I didn't have anything lined up, and I could have waited another month and tried to 1031, but I just ended up paying the taxes on that. The second deal, I'm trying to remember which one I bought next, but the next one that stands out was a broker brought me a deal in my local town, and this was perfect because they had their names on the whiteboards. No tech. I had a website, but it was just terrible. And so another great deal that I knew when I saw it, I was like, we need to get this under contract. So I would say this one was a little more lucky. This was 31,000 square feet, brought to me by a broker, 193 units. Purchase price now we're in the millions, so 1.75. And the beauty about single family was like, hey, okay, what do I need? I got a closing statement. You need, 370 grand to take this thing down, whatever it was. And I was like, oh, perfect. I'm trying to get out of single family at this time anyway. I'm like, let's sell this 4-unit in this duplex and we'll 1031 into this. So I went under contract. Those hit the market. Thank goodness they sold in time. And then I took down this little bit larger deal, and we still have that one. But again, got in there, increased NOI. I just went through a refinance, got all my money back. So now I own this asset with no cash invested. Cash flow is around $9,000 a month. It's perfect. That was like the perfect scenario. So that was the next deal. I think that was number 2. And then I purchased a small deal. And this is where I kind of go back when people ask me about storage. They're like, yeah, I got this, 8,000 square foot deal. And I'm like, oh man, dude, it takes all the same amount of work to do that deal as it does this other deal that I just did. And so I bought this little one. And that's actually kind of what got me into the development space a little bit. The whole play with this smaller one was, hey, let's buy this. We'll improve operations, but we'll also expand it. And so I went through, that was my first kind of like working with an engineer on how do we expand a site. So that was kind of the gateway into the development space.
Yeah, everyone's got that gateway drug, that's for sure. But that's something we've been talking about recently is, we've been making a bigger push towards some development sites. I know we've conversed about that a few times, but looking for those stabilized facilities that just need to be expanded, right? Or maybe it just needs a little bit of work, but you can do a massive expansion to create that equity. And that's really what I want to start to get into is that you've made a big push towards development. Like, what's attracted you to that? Do you think there's bigger margins there? What is it about development that excites you so much?
Well, yeah, so, and this hasn't come to fruition just yet, but I can see the light. I was kind of going down the road of like, who makes the most money in real estate? You know what I mean? So I was looking at different asset classes, multifamily being one, and all these other asset classes. I'm like, who is making the most money? And so that kind of led me down this development path. I'm like, I have no idea what that looks like, but that's what kept coming up is like these developers that are building massive projects and getting out they're taking big chunks of money all at once. And so that was really attractive to me. And then also, I am really a buy and hold investor. My bread and butter is never just to build it and sell it, but you know, if I can have that on the back end, like shoot, dude, like that's right up my alley. So cash flow while I hold it, and on the back end, we're making good money. So
Yeah,
that's
and
go
go
ahead.
ahead. All I was gonna say is like that's something that we've been looking at is like you're building a Class A facility that you can hold, that you have multiple dispositions, right? And even if you're at that super top level of you get the land under contract, you can entitle it and sell it, or you can entitle it and build it and sell it as like a contract builder, or you can entitle it, build it. It's a great facility. You're going to keep it for yourself and refinance it, and now you got a Class A facility, and we're all around the same age. It's a metal building. The next 50 years of our lives, I don't want to say it should be on cruise control, but damn near close to it. Whereas my rentals that are 10 years old, I'm doing water heaters. I'm doing HVAC units. I'm starting to look at roofs that we might have passed on that are going way quicker than that 50-year time horizon. You're really building something that's true legacy. That's what's attracted me to it. And sounds like something similar for you.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And then, you know, when I started going this development route, I was also comparing the cost to acquire an existing facility to what it costs to build. So at that time, like it was, you know, peak pricing on self-storage. Things were trading over $110 a square foot. I'm like, geez, how do we build that and sell it for 110? You know, like why be trying to go out here and acquire existing sites that are 20 years old at $80 a square foot and everyone's saying it's a deal? I'm like, that's crazy. Like, so then it led me to like, well, let's just build these things. And then we do have the exit in hand if we want, right? So that led me to my first big development deal.
Ian, you want to bring this up on the screen?
Yeah, go ahead. So, Mitch, we've been doing some background stalking. Those that are watching, you can see that we're doing stuff. So we went and stalked Mitch on Facebook. He posts a lot of content about stuff that he's building. I guess this is the Class A facility that you were just talking about. Looks like you're getting ready to pave, I think.
Yeah, so this is number 2 development. I do have one site, you know, that's like 85% full. But yeah, this is another development, 60,000 square feet, about 50% climate, 50% non-climate, 400 units on this site. And yeah,
are you putting these up in phases, or
so this is the first site that we did in one phase, or that we're doing in one phase. But yeah, my first site I did it's in 2 phases. And the reason behind that one was the bank wouldn't allow me to build all of it because I own that one 100% alone. And they were like, well, dude, back to this whole like, where's your experience? They were like, you've never built anything. Like, we're not going to put up 70,000 square feet and hope that you do well. So went in there and said, okay, we'll chop it up, you know, 25,000 square feet on phase 1 and the remaining on phase 2. To answer your question, this one's all one phase. The first one I had to phase.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. What I see, Jay, you gonna ask Terry Royce's question there? I knew you were. Terry's our buddy. Terry wants to know: are you asphalting on top of the gravel or sticking with gravel? But I think your caption above it says "getting ready for asphalt," so I'm not going to make any assumptions here. But Mitch, please let us know if you're asphalting.
Yes, man. Asphalt will be here. It looks like by the end of the week. So we'll do a top coat on this, Terry, and then later we'll come back and do another coat on top of that. That'll be the final coat. But yes, yeah. What our goal is with the developments is to build class. Let's call it. I don't know. People get weird about Class A being only multi-story. I'd call this a Class A being climate, non-climate, drive up. We have drive up climate here. I mean, it's fully gated, fully fenced. I mean, this is as nice as you can get without going to a multi-story product. So our goal is to build a Michigan-based portfolio that has larger sites. So in 10 to 15 years, we've got 50 great locations in a centralized area. And now we can sell that off to a larger REIT, a national company, whatever that is. They call that the roll-up strategy. That is kind of the big picture here is we want to create a presence in Michigan with nice product that's over 50,000 square feet, and we will be good in the back end. So that's kind of, I guess, a little later down my development journey, but that's what led to this. Like, let's go out and create a machine that can build sites quickly, get them on renting fast, and then stabilize. And now we've got options. We can cherry pick, keep some of the best ones. We can sell off any other ones. Like,
Right.
the world's our oyster, I hope.
Yeah, no, you have options, right? And I think it's really smart. So what's the biggest challenge with development you see in this goal that you're running towards of doing a massive roll up? What's a challenge that you foresee going forward?
Well, I've got a lot of them, but I would say the number one is probably capital. I mean, if I had $5 million today, we would hit that 15 to 20 site, portfolio really quick. I am involved with other partners, and we're not syndicators, and they are not either. They are kind of the big fish, and I'm kind of the small fish in terms of capital. So that puts me in a tough spot. So I'd say capital being number one, and then site selection is probably right behind that. Like getting into markets that need storage yet, not overbuilding, being strategic there. And so far, man, like sites just keep coming up, and it's kind of crazy. And I'm not sure if that's going to end or not. So that's kind of a little worry of mine. It's kind of just like back in single family where you're like, where's the next deal? Are we sure we're going to get a next deal? Right. So it's that hamster wheel of like the unknown. But other than that, we've got the pieces now. I've got, fantastic engineers. We have a GC that runs the projects. Like capital is somewhat taken care of, at least 2/3 of it. So, yeah, I'd say those are my hurdles.
Yeah, they seem pretty similar to what everyone else is seeing. Development brings its own challenges, especially. I mean, I don't know. I guess I should ask this. Like, I'm in a densely populated area, so everybody's got red tape, and they don't want you to mow over forest. Everything's stormwater management, and it's the end of the world, and everything's impacted by the bay. What challenges do you have operating in Michigan? Are you operating in small towns, big towns? Like, what are we looking at to make your job easier or harder, specific to where you are local in Michigan? Because development is storage is hyper local. Development's even more hyper local on top of that, I would say, at least in my experience anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, every township's different. You're going to have different hurdles at every township level. I mean, it could be, you run into some invasive species that you've never even heard of, right? Like, or wetlands has shut down at least 5 sites for us. So, wetlands, you just run into a lot of different things in development. And what your goal is there is to get to that answer before spending a lot of money. So, we look at all these like pre-development stuff, wetlands, where's water going, kind of like the stuff that you said, what township, things are we going to run into? Do we need a brick facade? We just went through a project. It's the next project in the queue. It's 100,000 square foot site, massive deal, by far the biggest, number to me. But at first they required the full exterior of all buildings to be brick. Well, that was like $250,000. I mean, that was crazy. So, we did get through that. We were able to get them to kind of, only place it on end caps or front facing buildings and do these things where, we were able to get that cost down and make the project viable still. But yeah, man, there's just so much with development that can come up. But those are some of the things.
Yeah. So one last kind of question, because I think this kind of sums up a lot of the audience that we have that aren't self-storage investors as well. You know, they've heard that it's been a very good asset class here for the last several years. A lot of real estate investors that started in single family, like kind of all of us, have started dabbling in that. Like, do you think starting from scratch in self-storage today is still kind of a good idea? Number one. And also, like, where would you direct a newer self-storage investor to start with? And a few assumptions. Assuming that they're a successful real estate investor already, you know, they own single families, they own some rentals, maybe they even own some multifamily and some commercial stuff. They have access to capital. They have access to, you know, good credit that they could potentially get bank financing. Because I think Ian and I both have lots of folks in our circle and a lot of listeners to this podcast that meet this exact description, and they're not sure if it's, you know, quote unquote too late and they missed the boat to get into self-storage. And if not, like, do I do development stuff, or do I buy kind of mom and pop facilities that are less than 15,000 square feet? Or do I try to do bigger stuff? Do I stay in smaller markets? Do I stay in my home market? You know, any advice kind of on that aspect?
Yeah, so to the first question being like, should I get into development? I think it's kind of like, to me, I would start local. So if you are going to get into it and you have all those resources and you have the skills, you've worked your way up. To me, the big thing was the team that was around me. So I knew nothing about retention ponds or setbacks and all these different requirements, but I was like, I don't need to know all that. I'm going to find a good GC that can help me and be in my corner on those things. So I think a lot of people do get a little shy when it comes to development, because it is, I mean, there's a lot more risk, you know, but again, back to who's making the most money, the guy that's taking the most risk is typically. So, you know, hey, are you comfortable with taking on more risk to have a bigger reward? I think that's a personal question. And so I would say go for it, but also really know what the heck you're doing. Don't just, I know folks that built a 400 unit site and he's 5% full right now, you know, and he's struggling. Like, that's because he didn't do his homework. He didn't get a feasibility study. He didn't, you know, he's just rolling with it. And it's like, dude, you're spending millions of dollars. Like, you better know what you're doing. So I say there's an education component to there. What was the second question was, or the second part of your question?
Getting started.
Yeah.
Like what type? Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, to kind of piggyback that, I mean, having a good engineer. So if you are going to decide to go down the development route, find someone that's building what you want to build and has done multiple of those projects. So my first guy was like, I seen a self-storage site, and then I seen the builder's little sign out there. So I'm like, hey, how many, sites have you guys built? Oh, we've done 20 of them, you know? Okay, well, I'm going to go with this guy as my GC. So, and then, hey, who do you recommend as an engineer in this area? Also, another key component for you. So an engineer, a GC that you can rely on so you don't make huge mistakes. And then I worked pretty heavily with the steel manufacturer in terms of, unit mix, site layout. You know, in Michigan, we want to run our buildings north and south. I remember getting my first project going. I had them east and west. And well, the snow and how that all works, I had that site laid out completely wrong. So having those people kind of in your corner to help you.
Yeah, relying on the experts, I think, goes a long way. We tell people all the time, wherever you are, if you're getting financing, if your lender's telling you no or reducing your loan amounts, you need to go back and gut check yourself and say, okay, well, what's going on here? What do they know that I don't know? Because they look at a lot more deals than I do. And I think that's a really smart thing that you brought up. We're doing a deal right now that we're getting ready to release where the guy, he laid out the whole property. He entitled all the land, very particular to how he wants to do it. And we said, hey, man, you want to stay on with us? Like, we'll give you a little less money, but do you want to stay on with us? And he took a $500,000 pay cut to get some equity upside because he wants to see the site through as much as we want to see the site through. But he's built several other sites. He's later on in his career, and he's just like, I don't want to build them anymore. I just want to entitle them and find a guy like you who can build them. And we're kind of utilizing the same thing. Hey, who's your contacts? What do you got? Here's my Rolodex. Here's your Rolodex. Who can save money? Who's got the best this, that, and the other thing? And I think that's very smart to rely on the people around you. Mitch, this has been super informative. Guys, if you get any value out of this, please share it. This is where real stuff happens. One thing we like to ask all of our guests before we let them go is what's one book or podcast that's been like really relevant to you, or you think everybody should hear or listen, or just what you enjoy?
Yeah, I'd have to go through my Audible. I am a big believer in like self-education. I mean, this is what got me here is like self-improvement. So every day, I mean, it's writing down my goals. It's focusing on how do I get better? How do I become a better investor every single day? So I'm a like education junkie. You'll see me in many masterminds, paying way too much money in education, but I am like a sponge, and I'm kind of the guy that's like, I'm going to just take what you've done and what's worked for you. And then I'm going to throw my twist on it. But that's, hey, it's already proven. These guys are running it. This is how they're doing it. I'm just going to cherry pick the best information. And like, that's what I do with books too. It's like, I might not get everything out of the book traction, but I'm going to take little pieces and I'm going to implement that into my workflow. So I'd say, if you're not reading books, you definitely should be. And I always try to do the things that I'm like, if I'm currently struggling on delegating, I'm reading, Who Not How. I'm focused on what am I struggling on, and I'm going to education to solve that problem. So, man, there's so many good ones, but I'm kind of like a hype guy too. So crazy or not, Be Obsessed or Be Average is by Grant Cardone is some might like mock me for that, but like I love that book because it just is like, do you want what you've already had your whole life, which is probably pretty basic, or are you trying to go big? And I've always been like, I just want to go bigger with everything that I'm doing. So that one, and then of course, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, that's what got me into everything. So I'd have to give credit to that. But yeah.
I agree with that hype statement. I read 10x, not 10x is greater than 2x, whatever Grant Cardone's 10x book is. And it's like, like I'm ready to kill, but you need that every once in a while to get you over the hump because it's easy to get in the rut, So, dude, this has been awesome. Mitch, where's the best place people can find you on the internet? They want to learn about what you're doing. They want to learn maybe how to invest with you, whatever it may be. Where can they find you?
Yeah, Instagram, just Mitch Pater, real simple. Facebook, I think it's Mitchell Pater. You should find me on there. And then LinkedIn as well. I'm on there trying to do a little bit more posting. I'm trying to post more. It's just, kind of looking at where your time's best spent. But those three platforms you could find me on.
Yeah, we say it all the time is, man, I wish I had that like trait to pull out my camera and literally just record anything. I don't have it. Like we played in a golf event the other day, me, Jason, and his business partners, and we're out there. Like, well, you got to record yourself on the one hole, and I'm like, I can't do like it was so hard to record.
It's like you don't even think about it.
No. Some people are ingrained to do it.
I think someone that's really good at it is the Bigger Pockets guy, Beardy Brandon. I think he's naturally like, this is what his skill set is to be in front of the camera. I mean, I think anyone can learn to be really good at that, but I think you also got to enjoy it too. And I got to a point where I was posting a ton of stuff, and I was just, my daily life was like on stories, but for many years, I didn't really see these huge benefits. It was like, hey, how many new private money lenders did I get from posting every day for the last 3 years? And it's like, maybe one. Like, I don't know. My results weren't really there, so I kind of started shying away from it. But you never know who's watching, man. I mean, I know there's there's probably a ton of people that are watching this and learning so much from you guys and not saying a word. So, I mean, it's powerful too.
Yeah. Well, and also going back to if you mentioned who, not how, Ian, you know, if you want it bad enough, find a who for it, right?
Yep.
Because we know how to do it. And, you know, we all do it at whatever capacity, but it's like, hey, find a who. And it's like, hey, this is your job. You follow me around and everything I say, you know, record it and then create content around it.
Yep.
Easier said than done, but it's very doable.
I think they forget to say monetize it. That's the other big thing, right? Like, is how do you monetize and how do you back out a lot of those things? But either way, man, this has been absolutely awesome. We don't want to take up much more of your time. We appreciate you. It's very knowledgeable. This is a real insight look to someone who's actually doing development that's not Grant Cardone. You brought up Grant Cardone, not a Grant Cardone, not something that's unobtainable. Mitch is just like us, not to take anything away from you, but he's one of us. He's one of the boys doing legitimate deals. So appreciate you, man. Look forward to seeing you out there, and we'll catch you all on the next one.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.